Alright guys, good to see you again. I'm Dominic. This is the World Class Happiness channel, as most of you know. Now, I haven't made a video for 2 or 3 weeks, and that is sort of like my first lesson. I'm going to give you two lessons for one today, and that's all this channel is, little life lessons from my own experience and things I've learned off other people. I've never had plans to be some sort of global influencer as such. It's just a case of helping out a few people, and these 2 lessons will hopefully help you in some way. Now, the first lesson is giving you kind of the reason why I haven't made a video for 2 or 3 weeks, and then the second lesson is the real lesson, if you like. So the reason why I haven't made a video for a little while is simply because, even though there are lots of things I could talk about, there are things that quite often I kind of have in my mind, and I think, right, I'm going to make a video about that because I feel a certain way about it. I feel quite passionate about it, or I even at times feel a little bit annoyed about it, and I want to tell you what my views are on it, and then tell you how I cope with it and stuff like that. But what I always do, I have this rule, whether it be that I'm going to talk to someone or approach somebody about something, about an issue, or whether it's about putting a post on social media or something like that. My rule is always to leave it for a day. All right, and the reason I do that is because if I still feel the same way after a day, I'd normally go through with it. However, if I don't feel the same, if I don't feel as passionate or as annoyed or whatever it might be, then I'll be happy to move on. So that's kind of what I've been doing the last 2 or 3 weeks. I've been doing that on various different subjects and stuff like that, and it's turned out that I haven't got quite so strong views the next day, and I'm not feeling quite so passionate about it, so I move on. Okay, so that's my reason for not being on for a little while. It's not just me being lazy. So that's lesson number 1. Take a bit of time before you actually rant or before you give your strong views, because the next day your strong views may not be as strong, or they may have even changed. Okay, now lesson 2, this is the real lesson, and it's about the Olympics. And the reason I picked the Olympics in the end is because I've always been passionate about the Olympics, and I probably always will be. Love watching the Olympics. Watched my first Olympics in 1984, was inspired even back then, and really that was my life goal, really, was to try and go to the Olympics, and I had plans of maybe becoming an Olympic champion, the same as lots of other people, and yeah, it didn't work out that way for me, and I've got no real regrets about that now, because it is what it is, and things work out how they work out, and I've still taken lots of lessons from that, and I've been able to kind of use them lessons in my life after judo. So the reason I'm giving you this this lesson, which is an Olympic story, is because we can use it in sport and we can use it in other walks of life. So this is a story. I'm going to tell you a little story, and it's a story that I heard when I was doing a psychology. It's kind of a psychology course I did. That was a while ago, a long time ago now, really. And I think we were sent all this stuff through the post, and there was lots of sort of paperwork and stuff, and there was a story within the paperwork. There was lots of things that I've heard lots of times about the 4-minute mile and all those different things, but this story I'd never heard, and it's a story that kind of stuck in my mind. However, because it's such a while ago, I can't really remember the exact details of the story, so I may be telling you very, very slightly wrong. I couldn't tell you whether it was a man or a woman, or whether which Olympics it was involving, but what I do know is it was a swimmer. For certain, it was a swimmer. Now, the story goes is that the swimmer was sat at home watching the Olympics on TV, and wanted to be a swimmer themselves, wanted to be an Olympic swimmer, and wanted to win the gold medal. Now, what they did when they saw the winning time in the event that they raced in, the person compared the winning time in the Olympics with their own personal best time, and it was a massive difference, a huge difference in terms of the Olympic champion and where they were at that point. But they had plans to go to the next Olympics and win the gold. So this person decided that they were going to break it down and goal set so they could make their dream a reality. Now what they did is they looked at the winning time from that particular Olympics, and worked out, you know, what time, or estimated what time would probably they'd have to swim in the next Olympics in order to win, because things generally tend to improve. So obviously up the time a little bit, and compared that to their current personal best. Again, the gap's now even bigger. And you would look at that gap. Most people would look at that gap and think, well, it's just impossible. It's not going to happen. There's no way that you could possibly do that, especially not in 4 years' time. But what this person decided to do was to kind of take, you know, break it down. And what they did is sort of, they worked out how many, you know, obviously 365 days in a year, and there's 4 years, and then work out how many days in a month and weeks in a, you know, weeks in a or hours in a week, and all that sort of thing, and how many sessions they would have during that period. So they actually worked out exactly how many sessions that they would actually be practicing until the Olympic final 4 years down the road. So I don't know how many sessions it was, but obviously it's going to be a lot in that period. Now they worked out that they took the winning time that they'd worked out was probably going to be the winning time in 4 years' time, and compared it with their current personal best, and then worked out how much time would have to be shaved off their personal best in order to get to the you know, the best time currently, and then obviously get better than that. And it worked out that over that period, if you broke that down session by session, they would only have to improve their time by an absolutely minuscule amount. I mean, like, you wouldn't even be able to blink as quick. It was that small of a chunk of time that they would have to take off each session in order to improve. So all of a sudden it seemed a lot more achievable and a lot more realistic. And what you got to then remember is every time you go to training, you're then trying to shave that little bit off. So you're motivated for every single session for 4 years, rather than, you know, going to your first few sessions and thinking, well, I've got 4 years, I've got 3 years, I've got 2 years. Every session they're just trying to shave that little tiny bit off, and you're going to be motivated for every single session. So in 2 years' time you might still be a good way off, but you're actually a lot closer than you were 2 years prior to that. So you, even though you're still a way off, you know that if you're still hitting your targets, you know exactly where you are, and you know whether you're on target or not. Now I found that really fascinating. I found that brilliant, because it actually turned out that particular swimmer then did go to the following Olympics and did win the gold medal, which makes it even more of a fascinating story, because it proves that it can work. And I know from my own experience, having been an athlete and not having goal set as well as I could have. It's a little bit harder in judo because there's lots of variables, the other opponent and so on. But you know, that I did see people who, at a certain period of time, you know, at a certain time, I felt they're nowhere near that level. And then lo and behold, 4 years later or 8 years later or whatever, they're there at the Olympics. And there were people who even won medals, who were definitely not on that radar for 8 years before, you know. So so it proves it can happen. It proves that if you do actually, one, work hard, and you've got that work ethic, two, you've got the determination, three, the belief, and four, the strategy, really, and you can break it down into smaller chunks, you can make it. And you know, the reason I'm saying this is because it's relevant not just for sport, but it's relevant for anything, really. I know there's people out there running their own businesses and stuff, so you could apply exactly the same thing to that. You know, if you wanted your business to grow by a certain amount within a year or 4-year period or whatever it might be, and you kind of break down how much you needed to move forward during those different periods, then you can keep a check on where you are and whether you're on target. And I'm now trying to do that a little bit more, sort of moving forward after the pandemic. And I've always been quite poor at that, and I've been quite poor at goal setting in the past. And you know, but now I've got people kind of a little bit more sort of chasing me up and making, you know, I make myself accountable a lot more if things aren't quite right. And you know, I've got people saying, have you done this, and you know, that needs to be done by this time, and that's working already. And I think you can do that with lots of different things, and it doesn't have to be to the level of, you know, Olympic champion. It could be on a much smaller level, but the system or the strategy still applies to an extent. So so yeah, that's my lesson, or my 2 lessons today. Hopefully they help, and hopefully you'll take them on board and possibly use them in your own lives. So I'll make another video in maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, I don't know. But if you like what we're talking about on the channel, please subscribe. It really does help, and give the videos a thumbs up, and I'll see you on another one. Cheers guys.